Who starts at quarterback this season for the Seattle Seahawks? It looks like we have a two-man race at the moment between Drew Lock and Geno Smith. When you look at Drew Lock, he was acquired in the trade when Seattle shipped off Russell Wilson to Denver. Pete Carroll has been really high on Drew Lock. He has said a lot of good things about him. As a matter of fact, he said that if Drew Lock was available in this past year's NFL draft, he felt like he would have been the first quarterback taken off the board. Now, I don't really know if I will fully agree with those statements. If you're talking about in terms of potential and upside, Drew Lock probably would have one of the highest ceilings out of all the quarterbacks who were drafted in this past year's draft class. However, he was a second-round pick for a reason coming out of the 2019 NFL Draft, which Denver ended up taking him out of Missouri. And so far, his NFL career hasn't really had the ideal start. Last season, he appeared in 3 games for Denver. He went 0-3 as the starter in those matchups, completing 60.4% of his passes, throwing for 787 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. The previous season, 2020, he went 4-9 as a starter for the Broncos, throwing for 2,933 passing yards, 16 touchdowns to 15 interceptions, while completing 57.3% of his passes. Now, for Drew Lock, maybe a change of scenery is what he needed, because it's not like he had an offensive-minded head coach at the helm. He had Vic Fangio as his head coach, and he is more of a defensive-minded head coach. So with him going to Seattle, Seattle has a pretty good group of wide receivers. He's going to be throwing to DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. They have a pretty good stable of running backs. And the offensive line also for Seattle has improved. It's a little bit better going into this season compared to what it has been in the past. So when you look at Drew Lock, obviously, he has more upside and potential compared to Geno Smith. You're looking at somebody who has pretty good athleticism and has a really strong arm. He can throw the ball from any angle, any part of the field. And Pete Carroll loves strong arm quarterbacks. As a matter of fact, every single quarterback that is on the depth chart currently for Seattle, Drew Lock, Geno Smith, Jacob Eason, and even Levi Lewis, all of them have pretty strong arms. So when you look at Drew Lock, the upside's there, the potential's there. You're just wondering if the coaching is going to be good enough to develop Drew Lock. Because if Drew Lock ends up being the starting quarterback for Seattle, they're going to be a little bit more explosive compared to what they would be if they would start Geno Smith, simply for the fact that Drew Lock has that gunslinger mentality, and that's kind of what got him in trouble with the Denver Broncos. It's nothing wrong with being aggressive, but you also have to learn how to take calculated risk. You never want to go into life taking unnecessary risk. You always want to go into something with an emergency plan just in case. Yes, you do have to take risks sometimes, but at the same time, there's no point in taking unnecessary risks that could end up making you lose it all. And for Drew Lock, too many times throughout his Denver Broncos career, he was too aggressive, and his aggressiveness ended up costing Denver Broncos a lot of ball games. But, however, I do feel like with Seattle, him getting a fresh start could be what he needs to get his career going in the right direction. Meanwhile, you look at Geno Smith. Geno Smith has been the Seahawks' backup quarterback for the past 2 seasons. They re-signed him this offseason to a 1-year deal, $3.5 million. And he was pretty solid for Seattle when he had to start in absence of Russell Wilson. When he ended up going down with that injury, he threw for 702 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, and had 1 interception, and completed 68.4% of his passes. And I think a lot of people are overlooking Geno Smith in this quarterback competition. I know he may not be the more popular or sexy pick to be the starter, but he does have a good amount of experience. He has familiarity with the playbook. And on top of that, Pete Carroll actually came out and said that Geno Smith is kind of leading the quarterback competition right now simply for those reasons. However, if I was a betting man and I had to put money down right now on who I think will end up being the starter if the season was to start today, I would have to roll with Geno Smith. And I know a lot of Seahawks fans are probably not going to be happy with this assessment, but you look at Geno Smith, he was rock solid last season. And on top of that, when he was starting, it's not like Seattle was getting blown out. They were right there. You go back to that Pittsburgh Steelers game when he ended up having the ball punched out by the best defensive player in the league named TJ Watt. He had Seattle in situations to win ball games. So for Geno Smith, I don't think he would be a bad option. And it's not like anybody's expecting Seattle to be world beaters this year. As a matter of fact, a lot of people expect Seattle to probably be one of the worst teams in the league this season. So if Pete Carroll is really trying to win, the quarterback who gives him the best opportunity to win this season is Geno Smith. However, if Pete Carroll wants to swing for the upside and try to see what he has in Drew Lock, then you should start Drew Lock. Either way, Seattle's quarterback situation isn't really ideal, and Pete Carroll has came out and said that he doesn't expect them to add a veteran, so it does look like they're going to be trading for Baker Mayfield, and it looks like it's either going to come down to these two. Now, I probably also should talk a little bit about Jacob Eason. Jacob Eason spent last season, at least in the preseason, starting for the Indianapolis Colts. He ended up not winning that backup quarterback job. He ended up getting beaten out, so he's on Seattle. And Jacob Eason has a really strong arm, but he has a tough time throwing with touch. Every ball he throws kind of is a fastball. It has no touch. He doesn't know how to lead wide receivers open. So he needs a good amount of development, but the arm strength is there with him. Then you have Levi Lewis, who played his college ball for the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. And I watched a lot of Levi Lewis. He has a pretty good arm despite being small. He's only 5'10", 5'11", but he has pretty good mobility. And it's going to be interesting to see what he does throughout the offseason program for the Seattle Seahawks. Could he end up beating out Jacob Eason for that third-string quarterback job? But right now, I expect Geno Smith to be the starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks this upcoming season. I know many of you Seahawks fans watching this probably aren't going to like that, but I just think that Geno Smith at the moment, with the experience factor, the fact that he knows the playbook more compared to Drew Lock, I think that Pete Carroll is going to roll with him. But if Pete Carroll wants to roll the dice and try to swing for the upside, go for Drew Lock.